Hello and welcome to the program. Following the European elections in May, former German Defense Minister Ursula von der Leyen has assumed the role of President-elect of the European Commission. Last week, she presented the structure of the next European Commission and its new 26 commissioners. Based in Brussels, the Commission is in charge of enforcing EU rules and the bloc's treaties. It is the only EU body that can draft laws. So, will Ukraine manage to build an effective dialogue with the new European commissioners? To answer this question, we are joined in the studio today by Sergiy Gerasymchuk. He is the member of the board at Foreign Policy Council, Ukrainian Prism. Hello and thank you for joining us. So first question. According to Ukrainian experts, the new composition of the European Commission gives Kyiv reason for cautious optimism. Can you expand on that?
Well, that's true, but first we have to discuss the very procedure of nominations. Since Ursula von der Leyen was not a Spitzenkandidat, she was the result of compromise between the heads of the states, and definitely she had to consider the nominations proposed by the heads of the states for the European Commission, and that's exactly what she did. And as a result of that, we've got a company of very controversial persons. Some of them are well known to Ukraine, like Franz Timmermans, who is again in the who is represented in the European Commission, who is in charge of European environment and stuff like that. But he is very well-known politician and very influential European politician. On the other hand, we've got new faces like Hungarian representative who is supposed to be in charge of European neighborhood and European enlargement. Yeah. True. And he is a bit more controversial in comparison to Franz Timmermans. First, they have personal conflict with Franz Timmermans because Laszlo Trocan, the Hungarian representative, used to be Minister of Justice in the government of Viktor Orban, the government which was heavily criticized by Timmermans, which was criticized by the European Commission, which is in the process of procedure of sanctioning Hungary for violating the rule of law, rule of European law. So the fact that Laszlo Trocan was nominated, it was a compromise, but now he has to be appointed by the European Parliament. He has to be confirmed by the European Parliament, and I guess it's a very questionable whether he will get the position. Then, speaking about Ukrainian interests, Ursula von der Leyen herself is a very positive person, very positive for Ukraine. Since first, she is very close to Angela Merkel, and Angela Merkel indeed has done a lot for Ukraine and for promoting Ukrainian interests at the level of the EU and for lobbying sanctions against Russia at the level of the EU. So Ursula von der Leyen herself is quite good for cooperating with Ukraine. Then the High Representative for European Foreign Policy, Josep Borrell, is also more or less optimistic candidate for us because he is cautious about Russian Federation. He is well aware about Russian ambitions. So at this position, he is quite good for Ukraine and can be a good partner. Speaking about other candidates for other nominated persons for the European Commissions, I would like to highlight two persons. First, it's Yanis Lenarčič, who is to be in charge of European crisis management. That's a new position for European Commission, and Ukraine definitely is perceived in the European Union from the perspective of crisis. First because of humanitarian crisis, then because of military crisis, and emerging crisis is a crisis in the field of energy security, because in 2020 we are facing the problem of gas transit through Ukraine, via Ukraine, and Lenarčič might be in charge of negotiations how to resolve this crisis. Lenarčič is an interesting person from this perspective because he is not a newcomer to Ukrainian politics. He is well aware of the situation in Ukraine because he was working for OSCE during Revolution of Dignity in 2013-2014, and he was in Ukraine, and he is well aware of Ukrainian case, so that's a good nominee for the position of EU Commissioner for Crisis Management. Also, another person who will be in charge, definitely will be in charge of transit, of gas transit through Ukraine, is a representative of Estonia, Kadri Simson. And again, on the one hand, Estonia is well known as a good friend of Ukraine, like all Baltic states. Estonia was always supporting Ukraine. Plus, Kadri Simson herself is a very active politician. She has invested a lot into her career in the field of European integration in the EU development. So she is a very active person. The only matter of concern, of slight concern, is that she represents Centrist Party of Estonia, and Centrist Party of Estonia was known for being in close relations with Russian Federation, but it was in the past.
Now, one of the often the critique that we hear about the European Union is the fact that it doesn't necessarily show some sort of unity when it comes to decisions. It's its strength and its weakness in some sort of way. This idea of compromise. You opened your answer with this this person this representative from Hungary. How come someone who was Minister of Justice under Orban, heavily criticized by the EU, and the EU willing to sanction the country over these reforms, how can someone like that can have that kind of post right now, as he's obviously, I wouldn't say not fitted for the job, but like he's obviously under the targets of critics by the EU? How it's kind of a paradoxical here.
That's a very good question. But we have to keep in mind to bear in mind that von der Leyen was appointed as a result of compromise, and definitely she had to consider the position of the heads of the government, and it was Hungarian government that nominated Trojani for the commissioner. However, it's a bit tricky in the EU. It's always complicated in the EU. Now he has to be appointed by the European Parliament. His nomination has to be confirmed by the European Parliament, and I guess it's sort of tricked by von der Leyen, because she nominated him, but she wouldn't object if he is rejected by the European Parliament. So
she shows her goodwill, but in the meantime, she doesn't take responsibility if she gets rejected.
Because now it's responsibility of the European Parliament, and if Orban makes it through the European Parliament, then he is lucky one. But I doubt it, because I suppose that even in the main political party, European People's Party, there are a lot of concerns about his nomination, not only because of Ukraine, but also because of his attitude towards Balkans. Because Germany definitely and explicitly said that it expects Balkan states to be integrated in the EU. Hungary is hesitant about it, and I feel that Germany will push through, because in 2020 Germany will be country of presidency. It will host presidency of the EU, and definitely Germany wants a success story. It's not only a success story of Germany, it's also a success story of Angela Merkel herself, because it will be a year before the end of her
mandate and of her new election.
So she wants the success story of her. She wants to promote her ideas. She wants to promote her to guard her legacy. Political legacy, and I suppose that Trojani is a person that will not pass.
Now, it's interesting that we raised the issue of Germany here, because you talked earlier about the issue of gas transit in 2020 concerning Ukraine, and the problem with gas transit in Ukraine, and especially with Nord Stream 2, for example, is the kind of double speech of Germany here, which is allowing Nord Stream 2 to pass, basically to become a major player in Europe, but in the meantime saying it's protecting Ukraine and Ukraine's interest. Can the European Union be strong enough, let's say, to overcome the business interests of one country such as Germany concerning Nord Stream 2? Or will it follow that kind of path, according to you?
Well, again, that's a very good and complicated question. My guess, and that's mainly speculation, but my guess is that Germany wants to balance the interests of different players in the field of gas and oil. And the point is that simultaneously with promoting Nord Stream 2, Germany is building LNG terminals in its territory, and also does not exclude gas supplies from the United
America,
States.
from the US.
Right. Speaking about the Ukrainian case, again, I guess that was a bit a mistake of our government and our president, because when we were talking about gas transit, we were mostly focusing on the issue of gas transit per se, not about its implications, political and business implications. So we wanted to preserve gas transit through Ukraine, and that's something that Merkel promised to Ukraine. So now she is not tied by any obligations. She promised, and she is negotiating through European Commission about the transit of gas. But simultaneously, she didn't exclude Nord Stream 2, so that's what we have.
So she can't be bound, and she can't be criticized for her attitude towards
she can be criticized from the Ukrainian perspective, but not from the perspective of German
EU. She's following
voters.
the EU. Now, when it comes to certain countries, we talked about Hungary. That's an interesting case because Hungary does have certain, because of business interest also, but does have certain pro-Russian interest. Austria also showed a certain willingness to have closer ties with Russia. Recently, Emmanuel Macron made a speech. He was in the fall of Brégançon, saying that he wanted some Europe until Vladivostok, if I'm not wrong, and closer ties with Russia. How can Ukraine weigh in to reverse that kind of attitude, and how do you explain this attraction, this sudden or recent attraction to Russia from those countries which have been the first to sanction? I'm thinking about France, to sanction Russia at first.
Well, that's a long story, but I will try to make it short. Now we are talking about competition between Germany and France about leadership in the European Union. And sometimes Angela Merkel, despite all her influence in the European Union, is perceived as a sort of lame duck, because she is about to finish her political career both in Germany and in the EU. And I guess that French President Emmanuel Macron wanted to take this chance to take the leadership from German hands into French hands. However, it's very tricky, because France has a lot of ambitions in both EU external policy and EU internal reforms. But many Germans perceive it as reforms that are to be paid from the German pocket. And Angela Merkel, in her turn, tries to keep the balance. And my guess is that a lot depends on these relations between France and Germany, because French people and French president want to have a quick success. German approach is a bit different. Germans are always moving step by step. And if we have the support of Germans, then we are lucky, because it's difficult to rely on, to expect a lot of support from France. However, until Merkel is in place, I believe we still have good chances to have good negotiation positions with Russian Federation.
Well, thank you very much. It was a pleasure to have you in the studio today to highlight these technicalities and difficulties sometimes of the EU Commission. That was Sergiy Gerasymchuk, member of the board at Foreign Policy Council, Ukrainian Prism. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for the rest.